The morning after the storm, the city of Zithera was alive with energy, as if the planet itself was celebrating their survival. Towering crystal spires caught the sunlight, scattering rainbow colors across the streets, and Zitherans moved efficiently, repairing damage and tending to those injured in the previous night's chaos. Jalen Ryder walked beside Liara, noticing the subtle tension in her movements. She was quieter than usual, her sharp eyes staring at the distant horizon as though she were lost in thought. "Are you all right?" Jalen asked gently, breaking the silence. Liara shook her head slightly, her lips pressing into a thin line. "I am fine," she said. "But that storm, it showed me how unpredictable your species can be, and yet how dependable you are." Jalen smiled. "I think we humans are more than you give us credit for. We adapt, we survive. Sometimes we even inspire." Liara gave a small, almost imperceptible smile, but quickly looked away. She was still holding on to her pride and her beliefs. But Jalen could sense the beginnings of change. Over the next few days, they were assigned to a joint mission to retrieve rare energy samples from the floating plateau, a high region of Zithera known for its dangerous terrain and volatile crystal formations. Only the most skilled teams were allowed to attempt it, and for Liara to choose Jalen as her partner was unusual. Many Zitherans were wary of humans, but she seemed to trust him in a way she trusted no one else. The journey to the plateau was perilous. The path was narrow, with gaps wide enough to fall through, and floating crystal shards hovered above, occasionally shifting and threatening to drop without warning. Liara led confidently, her hands steady on her equipment, but Jalen noticed her eyes frequently checking him. "Why are you watching me?" she asked suddenly. "I am making sure you survive," he said simply. She raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Jalen realized that she was beginning to depend on him, even if she would never admit it aloud. As they neared the plateau's center, a sudden tremor shook the ground, sending floating shards tumbling around them. One shard struck Liara's leg, causing her to stumble. Jalen reacted instantly, catching her and pulling her to safety. The closeness forced her to look directly at him, and for a moment she saw him not as a human, but as a protector, a companion, someone she could rely on in ways she had never expected. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice almost lost in the wind. They continued carefully, finally reaching a cavern filled with rare glowing crystals. The light from the crystals reflected off the walls in vibrant blues and purples, creating an otherworldly beauty that left them both in awe. Jalen began collecting samples while Liara carefully examined the cavern for stability. Suddenly the cavern trembled, and a section of the ceiling began to collapse. Liara shouted a warning, and Jalen immediately grabbed her, shielding her as large shards of crystal fell around them. When the danger passed, they were both shaken but unharmed. "You humans are remarkable," Liara said, her usual sharpness softened. "You do not panic even in the face of danger." Jalen smiled, feeling warmth at her words. "I suppose I have learned from the best." They returned to the city with the samples, their teamwork earning them the quiet respect of many Zitherans. Liara, however, seemed conflicted. She had always believed humans to be reckless and unreliable, yet Jalen had proven the opposite, not through arguments or demonstrations, but through actions, courage, and compassion. Days later, an unexpected announcement shook the city. A faction of rogue Zitheran scientists had attempted to seize control of the energy crystals for themselves. They had set up an ambush on the outskirts of the city, and if they succeeded, it could lead to a catastrophic imbalance in Zithera's energy grid. Jalen and Liara were immediately dispatched to intervene. They traveled in a sleek hovercraft, moving across jagged crystal plains as alarms echoed through the city. When they arrived, they found the rogue faction attempting to extract the crystals with dangerous machinery. The humans' presence alone surprised the Zitherans, but Jalen had a plan. Using his knowledge of human tactics and strategy, he coordinated with Liara, guiding her movements and combining her precise knowledge of the crystals with his instinct for improvisation. The rogue Zitherans tried to resist, but Jalen's leadership and Liara's brilliance were a force to be reckoned with. Together, they neutralized the threat without unnecessary casualties, saving both the city and countless lives. After the confrontation, Liara looked at Jalen, her expression unreadable. "Us underestimated humans," she admitted. "You are not what I thought. You are capable, courageous, and honorable." Jalen felt a surge of pride, but more than that, he felt hope. He knew this admission was only the beginning. Thank you, Liara, that means more than you know. The following weeks were a mix of work and subtle tension. Liara began inviting Jalen to her laboratory, showing him experiments, discussing theories, and even asking for his opinions. Their discussions grew longer, deeper, and more personal. Jalen learned about her fears, the pressure she faced in her society, and the loneliness that came with her brilliance. Liara learned about humans, their strengths, weaknesses, and the beauty in their imperfections. One evening, after a long day of research, Liara experienced unexpected symptoms. Concerned, she visited the medical center, where doctors confirmed something extraordinary. She was pregnant. For Zitherans, pregnancy with a human was exceedingly rare, a result of a natural bonding process during close cooperation and mutual trust. Liara was stunned. She confided in Jalen privately, fear and uncertainty mixing with an unfamiliar warmth. This cannot be real, she whispered. I never imagined. Jalen took her hands in his. It is real, Liara, and whatever happens, we will face it together. This child is a symbol of trust, cooperation, and hope between our species, and you are not alone. Liara looked at him, her pride and skepticism warring with her growing affection. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel vulnerable. I do not know what to do, she admitted. Then we will learn together, Jalen said gently. We will navigate this step by step. And this child will be a new beginning. Over the following days, Liara and Jalen prepared for the future. They informed the city council cautiously, explaining the rarity and significance of the event. While some Zitherans were surprised, many saw it as a bridge between humans and Zitherans, a new symbol of unity. Liara's colleagues, who had once doubted Jalen and humans in general, now respected him for his courage, intelligence, and integrity. Despite the attention, Jalen and Liara focused on understanding the child's development. Liara taught Jalen about Zitheran biology, and he shared human knowledge. Together, they discovered ways to ensure both mother and child remained safe and healthy. The process deepened their bond. They laughed together, argued gently, and supported each other through moments of fear and joy. One quiet evening, they returned to the balcony of the tallest crystal tower, looking out at the horizon that stretched endlessly into violet skies. Liara leaned against Jalen, her hand resting on her abdomen. I never thought I could trust a human like this, she admitted softly. Jalen held her close, feeling the warmth and life growing between them. Sometimes life surprises us, he said. Sometimes the things we thought impossible become our greatest blessings. They spent the next months preparing for the child's arrival. Jalen learned Zitheran traditions for child rearing, blending them with human customs. Liara, who had always valued perfection, learned to embrace imperfection, understanding that love and trust were far stronger than any societal expectation. The pregnancy also brought unforeseen challenges. Some factions of Zithera remained skeptical, and natural dangers of the planet required careful planning and protection. But Jalen and Liara faced each trial together, their bond strengthening with every obstacle overcome. Finally, the day came when the child was born. It was a moment of pure joy and awe. The child's features blended human and Zitheran traits, shimmering skin with a soft, gentle glow, intelligent eyes that reflected curiosity beyond its years. Liara and Jalen held the child together, feeling a connection that transcended species and prejudice. The city celebrated the birth, seeing it as a new chapter in the history of Zithera and humanity. Liara, once adamant that she would never date a human, now looked at Jalen with eyes full of love and respect. You have changed everything, she said quietly. Jalen smiled, holding her close. We changed it together. As the sun set over the crystalline horizon, Liara and Jalen stood side by side, their child between them. The colors of the sky reflected the promise of the future, a future where humans and Zitherans could trust, collaborate, and even love one another. It was a future built not on fear or prejudice, but on courage, compassion, and hope. And for Liara, the alien woman who had once sworn never to date a human, she realized that love, trust, and family could overcome even the strongest beliefs. In Jalen, she had found a partner, a protector, and a companion. Together, they had not only survived Zithera's dangers, but had created something extraordinary, a new beginning for two worlds. The story closed with a quiet sense of peace and optimism. The skies over Scythera shimmered with gold and violet light, and for the first time the planet seemed to welcome the unity of two. Jalen Ryder had never imagined that he would be standing on a world so strange and beautiful. Scythera stretched before him like a dream, with crystal towers that glimmered in purple and gold light, and skies painted with shifting colors that seemed to move with their own rhythm. Humans had discovered this planet only a few years ago, but its energy crystals were already famous across Earth's scientific and military communities. Jalen had been sent as a human ambassador, not only to negotiate trade agreements but also to understand Scythera's people, a task far harder than anyone could imagine. From the moment he stepped out of the shuttle, Jalen felt the weight of 100 eyes on him. Scytherans were taller than humans, their limbs long and elegant, and their skin shimmered with a faint metallic sheen. Among them moved Liara, a woman whose presence seemed to command the attention of everyone around her. She had sharp eyes, intelligent and observant, and her posture was perfect, unyielding like the crystalline towers themselves. Jalen had heard rumors about her, that she was one of Scythera's most brilliant scientists and a strategist for their defense forces. She was also fiercely independent and openly disdainful of humans. Liara walked toward him, her movements fluid, almost gliding, and stopped a few feet away. "So you are the human," she said. Her voice was musical, but it carried a sharp edge. "I must warn you, I will never date a human. You are reckless, emotional, and primitive compared to us." Jalen smiled politely. "I'm here for diplomacy, not romance," he replied. He knew trying to argue with her would be pointless. Liara had built walls that no human words could breach. Still, he noticed her eyes studying him carefully, assessing, measuring, a habit of someone who did not trust easily. The first few days on Scythera were a whirlwind of formal meetings and inspections. Jalen visited laboratories filled with strange devices that hummed with energy, and conference rooms that floated above the city like glass islands. He listened carefully, learning as much as he could about the planet's society and culture. All the while, Liara remained close, her presence both a challenge and an inspiration. Despite her words, she could not ignore his curiosity and intelligence. One morning, Jalen was assigned to inspect the crystalline forests at the edge of the city. These forests were not made of trees, but of enormous crystal formations that grew from the ground like jagged sculptures. The crystals resonated faintly with a hum, which the Scytherans claimed was the planet speaking in its own language. It was beautiful but dangerous. The paths were uneven, and some of the crystal edges were sharp enough to cut through metal. Jalen's shuttle landed at the forest's edge, and he began walking carefully among the towering formations. Liara accompanied him, her long legs moving gracefully over the jagged terrain. As they walked, she spoke in her usual direct tone. "Humans think too quickly and act without thinking. I have seen this before, and it never ends well." "I will try to prove you wrong," Jalen said quietly, not challenging her but letting her words sink in. He wanted to show her that humans could be more than she expected. Their inspection was interrupted by a sudden tremor. The ground shook violently, and a crystal formation collapsed near them, sending shards scattering. Jalen dove to protect Liara, catching her arm and pulling her out of harm's way just in time. She looked at him, shocked, then quickly composed herself. "You are lucky," she said, brushing off her uniform. But her eyes betrayed a hint of admiration. Later that day, they returned to the city to report their findings. Liara had maintained her distance, but Jalen noticed her expression softening slightly, her sharpness giving way to curiosity. He could not yet tell if it was respect, or if she was reconsidering her beliefs about humans. The following days were filled with more unexpected challenges. One evening, Jalen was called to assist with a minor energy leak in one of the laboratories. While he worked to stabilize the crystal conduits, an accidental surge caused a small explosion. Liara arrived just in time, using her quick thinking to prevent a larger disaster. As the dust settled, they looked at each other, both catching their breath. "You humans are unpredictable," Liara said, shaking her head. "But I will admit, sometimes your unpredictability is useful." Jalen grinned, feeling that small acknowledgement as a victory. He had begun to see that despite her stubbornness, Liara's respect was growing, and he too found himself intrigued by her. She was not just brilliant and strong, she was also vulnerable, carrying the weight of her society's expectations, and that made her human in a way she did not want to admit. One night, the city announced a formal welcome banquet in honor of the human delegation. The hall was enormous, with crystal walls that reflected light in 100 directions. Zitherans moved elegantly, their conversations a mix of clicks and tones, their gestures precise. Jalen attended with the other diplomats, feeling slightly out of place among the alien grandeur. Liara arrived radiant in her ceremonial attire, and for a moment Jalen felt a strange pull toward her. He reminded himself to stay professional. During the banquet, a sudden alarm blared through the city. The energy conduits in one of the lower districts had overloaded, threatening to destabilize the crystal towers nearby. Without hesitation, Jalen followed Liara as she rushed toward the danger zone. The streets were chaotic, Zitherans running to secure civilians, and the air filled with the sound of resonating crystal vibrations. They arrived at a massive containment chamber, where an unstable crystal was growing at an accelerated rate, threatening to erupt. Liara quickly analyzed the situation, her fingers moving over a holographic display. Jalen worked beside her, following her instructions with precision. Together they managed to stabilize the crystal just as it threatened to break the chamber. Exhausted, they stepped outside into the night air. Liara leaned against a wall, catching her breath, and for the first time she allowed herself to show relief. "You are more capable than I imagined," she said softly. "I may have misjudged humans." Jalen looked at her, surprised. He could see the walls around her beginning to crumble, even if only slightly. "I told you," he said with a small smile. "Humans are not just reckless. We can be courageous too." The next days were quieter but filled with subtle tension. Liara began including Jalen in her work more, allowing him to witness her research and the challenges she faced as a leader in a society that valued perfection. Jalen admired her dedication and her brilliance, realizing that she was carrying far more pressure than he could have imagined. Their bond deepened during a mission outside the city. They traveled into the dense crystalline forests to retrieve rare energy samples. The journey was perilous, with sharp crystal spikes, unstable ground, and strange wildlife that sensed their presence. Jalen protected Liara during several near accidents, and she, in turn, guided him through complex paths with her knowledge of the land. They began to understand each other in ways that words alone could not express. One evening, as the sun set over the crystalline horizon, Liara and Jalen sat by a glowing lake of liquid crystal. The sky above them shifted in colors, reflecting their own unspoken emotions. Liara finally spoke, her voice quieter than usual. "You have a way of making me question everything I believed about humans." Jalen smiled, looking out at the glowing waters. "Maybe some beliefs are worth questioning," he replied gently. Liara laughed softly, a sound rare and beautiful on Zythera. "Do not get used to this, human," she said. "I am still certain I will never, like you." But Jalen noticed the tension in her words, the small signs of vulnerability. He did not respond, understanding that change took time and trust could not be forced. Their journey back to the city was interrupted when a massive storm rolled in. Purple lightning streaked across the sky, striking crystalline towers and sending fragments falling to the ground. Jalen and Liara were trapped on a narrow bridge between two crystal cliffs. The wind howled around them, threatening to sweep them off the bridge. Jalen grabbed her hand instinctively, holding her steady. "We need to move together," he shouted over the roar. Liara hesitated for a moment, then nodded. They moved carefully, coordinating each step until they reached safety. Once on solid ground, they looked at each other, breathing heavily. Liara's usual composure had faltered, and for the first time, she allowed herself to rely on a human completely. "You are impossible," she said, shaking her head. "And yet, I cannot deny that you saved my life today." Jalen smiled, feeling a warmth he had not expected. "We are stronger together," he said simply. That night, as they returned to the city, Liara remained silent, lost in thought. She had always believed humans were inferior, unpredictable, and unworthy of trust, but Jalen had proven her wrong, not through force, but through courage, intelligence, and compassion. The story of Part 1 closes with both of them standing on the balcony of the city's tallest tower, looking out at the alien horizon. Liara's heart was conflicted, her beliefs challenged in ways she had never anticipated. Jalen, standing beside her, felt hope that trust and understanding could bridge even the widest of gaps between species. and somewhere deep inside both realized that this was only the beginning of a journey neither of them could have foreseen.